Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming and watching this video. This is going to be a discussion about becoming a staff team member in the support team. My name is Cynthia Ng, also known as Arty Chan. I'm currently a senior support engineer. And with me today, I have
Lyle Kozloff, senior support engineering manager. I don't think there's going to be staff support engineering managers. So.
No, I think director would be the next level for manager, yes. Right? So just to give anyone who's listening a bit of context and a bit of context to the discussion as well. I personally wanted to do this specifically with you, Lyle, because, over the course of the years that that I was reporting to you and discussing what it meant to be a senior and how to become a senior, you just gave so much really good advice and a lot of really good kind of talking points almost to think about. And one of the things that kind of really struck me was the way that you could kind of almost summarize it in one or two sentences sometimes, at least as a basis for kind of thinking further about the whole process. And I've repeated some of those to other ICs, and I've had one or two of them actually, ask me in return, like, is it documented anywhere? Is it recorded anywhere? And I was like, no, this was just based on one-on-one conversations with Lyle. Like,
so this is like you're honoring me and shaving me at the same time, because I feel like if it's not in the handbook, we should probably get it in there.
But actually now it's changed, right? Because now we have a list of the competencies, leadership and technical competencies. And thank you to like everyone who's, obviously done work around that. I'm sure including, pretty much everyone on the management team. So I think things have changed a little bit, but at the same time, I think with staff, we've only ever had two in support. And especially with kind of the newer framework, we've really only had one. And with the promotion doc and everything, right, we really only have one example. So I think for a lot of the seniors, and I was talking to some of them today, still, it feels very nebulous. It feels very like, we're not sure. What do the managers think, right? So what do managers in support think of what it means to be a staff and what it takes to go from senior to staff? So that's kind of like the context and why I kind of really wanted to do this and, record it, get it up on Unfiltered, just because, yeah, like people have asked me, I've been like, I've had to admit, no, I've never actually recorded these sorts of discussions before. So really wanted to take the opportunity to do it. And thank you for doing this. So I think let's jump right into it. Unless there's anything else you want to add now.
Let's jump in.
All right, cool. So I think maybe the easiest place for most people to start, and I think for myself as well, is kind of like, what do you see as the main differences between senior and staff?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question, because I think there is sort of like a clear differentiator between intermediate and senior at this point, where folks, I think that's an understood problem. Whereas in the past, I think people are asking the same question as intermediates, like, how do I become senior? We don't have that many. And so I think we've done okay, but yeah, this is the next evolution. Like, what does staff mean? And I sort of like the big thought is that if our seniors are levers, then our staff are levered levers. Like, or maybe put it another way, like intermediates, like sort of your focus is on today, what's happening today and this week. Seniors is sort of like what's happening over like the next quarter. Staff is like further out. What problems exist and how do we address them? Like, how do we change the game for how support is done? And so it's a sort of about scope of influence. If you take a look at there's a flowchart in engineering that describes sort of like intermediate, staff, senior, and then it has like, other way around, intermediate, senior. And then the next part is this branching path of manager, and staff. And it's sort of at the senior level that's where you really make that choice. Like, I do not want to be a manager of people. I want to take the technical track, and staff is that technical track. So yeah, let's make this as much as it can be a conversation, because otherwise there's going to be lots of awkward pauses.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. No, I mean,
please react, respond.
Yeah, so I guess there's a lot for me to think about in what you just said. And actually, one of the interesting things that I've repeated to other people, and which was obviously based on conversations that we had previously, was kind of thinking about like also the kind of the focus of work. So I remember, talking about how like from intermediate to senior, you go from kind of focusing on your own work, and doing your work well, to senior kind of being the, thinking about the team and how do we kind of improve like team process or whatever it is to, kind of help the team further. And it's interesting, talking about focus, because I remember at some point you kind of mentioned that, staff takes that focus further as well, that we start thinking about GitLab and the company and, just like not just branching out focus in time, but also in breadth, in the impact that we have, as farther than just a team. You're talking about impact on the company. I don't know if there's anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think rephrasing that a little bit, like intermediates shape the customer experience, seniors shape the team, and staff shape the environment in which support is done. So yeah, it is big. It's going to be across team. It's going to be working in depth with engineers in GitLab. It's building influence, like that's much further reaching than you would as a senior. And yeah, it's really all about changing, augmenting, and improving the environment where support happens. And that could be, that could be very, very technical, down to the level of like submitting merge requests to GitLab. That could be at a different level, like, yeah.
So I know we had questions for prompt, but that actually leads me to not the next question, but the one after that, which is that like, looking at the promotion documents of various like people on the team who have been promoted to senior, you can kind of see that while everyone kind of met the requirements, there were differences in strengths and expertise, especially some variation in kind of the more technical versus leadership kind of competencies in terms of, I guess, the emphasis that you might see in the promotion document. And I'm kind of wondering like how you see that applying to staff.
Yeah, there's variation in the way that seniors get promoted. There's going to be variations in the way that staff get promoted. So there's going to be a set of requirements, but the way in which you fulfill them is not going to be more prescriptive than it was at senior. Rather, I think it will be less, because influence takes a lot of different forms. And so just like there's like lots of different sort of flavors of seniors surrounding a core of what it means to be a senior, I think there's going to be an even broader spectrum of what it means to be a staff engineer surrounding a core of what it means to be a staff engineer.
Okay, so I have a very kind of more personal view kind of question on this, because when I came into GitLab, I always thought of kind of the IC, and we call it a technical track. And so in my mind, I was always like, oh, that means I have to be really good at debugging and then like putting in bug fixes into the code base or something. And it's interesting because of course the example that you just gave about like, GitLab and stuff is in my mind a very technical, and the emphasis is very technical in that sense. And not to say that it isn't a technical track. Obviously, again, you have to meet at least all the requirements to become a staff. But can you give one or two examples of like what you see as really good examples of showing of like work that someone might do at the staff level that kind of emphasizes the more leadership competencies?
Well, I don't want to necessarily take away the technical piece of this. Like, leadership ultimately is about influence, and the difference between staff and managers, which operate at the same level in GitLab, like that, when you're a staff, you're the same level as a manager, and so the difference where that influence is placed is important, though. Like, staff engineers have influence among engineers and engineering managers. What's the easiest way to build influence with engineers? It's to speak their language, to be able to dive deep into technical, and to like win their respect. So there, I don't think that at that level, leadership and technical are very decoupled. Like, I think they're quite closely interlinked, and so it doesn't necessarily mean like fixing or like submitting MRs to the Golang because you discovered that there's a problem with Golang in the specific implementation of GitLab's Go libraries or something like that. But I would expect that a staff engineer, it's kind of like having a PhD. You find a problem area where you can make an impact. You aim to get a body of meaningful results, and like there's deliberate intention in getting those results. So, sorry, is that too general?
No, I mean, I think that's a little more general than what I was kind of necessarily hoping for, but I think that makes a lot of sense, that we're not trying to separate the technical and leadership competencies, that they're really just they're so intertwined. And it's just the fact that like the technical track is more, you're doing it at the technical level, I guess. Like
yeah, but I mean, like there's a spectrum of engineering teams, right? Like, and I'm cognizant that this is recorded, and I don't want to like throw any team under the bus. All engineers are technical, like but there definitely are some areas of GitLab that require a very different skill set than others, right? And so, depending on sort of the problem area where you want to have impact, your journey towards building influence in that area could be longer or shorter depending on what you're starting with. Like, if you're already like deep into the kernel code in your free time and you're working on like, I keep on bringing up Italy, but that's going to be like a more natural path. But if you have spent, say, a lot of time on authentication, then working with that team requires a totally different set of technologies. And if you've already done a lot of authentication stuff, going towards staff through those teams, it's just going to look a lot different. But it's kind of like a PhD in biology is hard, a PhD in physics is hard, and if a biologist wants to get a PhD in physics, that will potentially be harder than getting a PhD in biology.
Yeah. No, for sure. I think maybe the better analogy would be that if you have a master's in something and you're trying to get the PhD. But I think that totally makes sense. No, I think that that's a nice kind of I guess context, and like it definitely adds a better kind of thinking around it. I guess I'm still kind of curious as to whether there's an example you can think of that, you know, wouldn't necessarily require, like, say, an MR to the code. Like, what do you, like, is there something that you could see as like, okay, this still exemplifies what I would consider staff level work, even if it doesn't require you to submit an MR to the code base?
We might have to take this on async. I'd have to think about that a little bit more deeply.
Okay. Because I did notice that in the promotion doc, you know, that obviously one of the areas is to write advanced technical documentation. So, I mean, obviously, if that's in the promotion doc, I would hope, you know, that's kind of one of those examples where it's like, you're not making MR to fix a bug, right? Like fix something in the code, but you're still doing kind of staff level work by, you know, showing, I think how it's worded in the doc is like showing technical excellence by writing in the documentation. I'm actually just going to bring it up very quickly.
So that's exactly what I was doing.
Writing in-depth documentation that shares knowledge and radiates GitLab's technical strengths.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, in order to do that though, you really have to understand the feature set. You probably have touched the code, right? So maybe you didn't submit an MR, but I would expect that most staff support engineers will have submitted MRs to the GitLab code base.
So if you could try to summarize what we've been talking about, if it's possible, what it means to be a staff in 1 or 2 lines.
Yes. Influence of a manager with a focus on technical problems. That's my 1 line. But yeah, it would be nice if I had something like a little bit more pithy and clear. Yeah, I mean, I feel like what I need to do is I just need to like workshop some lines and see how they land.
Where... Turn it into a jingle. I don't know. Yeah. I think that's actually a really good one. It may not be very pithy, but it's a very good summary.
But yeah, I mean, like the path there is really about like expanding your influence beyond support. Like it's moving from like the safety of the team to, and I don't mean that GitLab's not safe outside of support, but it can be scary at first. And it's like showing up and understanding the problems and seeing the things that are affecting support and are holding us back from resolving customer problems more quickly. That's holding the team back either through like tickets being generated or not handling tickets efficiently, seeing those opportunities and going out into the world to make those things better.
Yeah, thanks. I like that. Okay, I'm gonna skip to actually a question that we have put into the doc that we were working off of. And her question, which is interesting because I think I know the answer to, but I want to put it in here, is how long do you think a senior would have to perform on the staff level before they're promoted?
Yeah. So the easy answer is there's no answer. Well, it's not an easy answer. There's no answer. So staff is at actually the level where it's based not just on merit. You can get promoted to senior just through merit. But once we get to staff, we actually are constrained by the organization where we can only have so many staff based on the size of our department. So that means that staff's based on organizational need and on merit. So you can have lots of merit, but if there's no need, you may never be promoted to staff like that. Just like if you wanted to be a manager, you could have all of the manager skills, have every manager certification, have like thousands of years of manager experience. But if there's nobody to manage, then you won't be hired as a manager. And that doesn't mean that you're not a good human or a technically competent person. It just is about organizational need. So we do have room on support right now. I would anticipate that like over the coming years, we'll probably have in the order of 1 to 2 per region. But it really will kind of depend sort of on that merit piece. So I think with that tone set, Rehab's question really is, how do I show, how long do I have to be a senior before it's even possible to show the merit to get into this role? And that also is just going to be, really is going to depend on the individual. I think for some folks, it could come quite quickly because they've spent the time on relationships, they've spent the time looking at large problems, and they've gotten results. For others, like they may just require more coaching. They may not encounter the problems naturally, like as they're working. Like their focus may be on something else, and they may not get the exposure to problems that would like boost them out of support into this sort of staff arena. So that's such a hand-wavy managery answer, but I would be surprised if you were a senior and then you submitted a promo doc like sooner than like 6 months to a year before. Like it would surprise me very much. But again, like if we have space and there's merit, like there's no minimum. There's just going to be questions as as the promo doc goes up. Why didn't we promote them directly? Or this seems soon, how come? So the sooner it is after your promotion to staff, the more airtight your promo doc needs to be, and the more evidence that, yeah. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I admit it's not entirely my question, so I hope so. But based on my reading of it, I would agree. I mean, in a lot of ways, I mean, I think it's almost like asking, well, how long do you have to be an intermediate before you become a senior? And if you look at, especially like, we've had a lot of promotions to senior this year. And if you look at how long they've been at GitLab, it varies quite a lot. I mean, we've had people who have been here less than a year get promoted to senior, but then also people who have been here for over 3 years. So I think staff is going to be very similar in the sense that like it really depends on the individual and the work that they've done. So I definitely agree. So yeah, I guess, so the last part kind of that I specifically wanted to cover was kind of like, what advice do you have for someone who wants to be moving from senior to staff?
Moving from senior to staff, performing well. Like number one, perform well as a senior. That would be a good baseline. So if you're a senior, then you should already be exhibiting those senior characteristics. You should be spending time building the team out, like pairing, helping intermediates to become better and more. And if you're doing those things, then you're probably going to be encountering more systemic problems or larger problems within GitLab, and starting to build relationships with other engineering teams. So once you have some of those relationships in place, that's where you find a problem area where you can make an impact, where the things that interest you also meet the needs of support, and you rely on your connection with that team and you get results, like you deliver. So diving in deep, like MRs to the docs, enablement, and like training with support engineers, and then also just like getting to the point where you are an expert in this area, and like expert not defined by the support team, but defined by the engineering team that you're working with.
Oh, it does seem like quite the high bar to become an expert as defined by the engineering team. But
I mean, we're not gonna like go and ask them, but that is that is staff level. Like that level of influence is kind of, that's the level that we're looking for. Like I'll only stumble over words, but I think that's kind of the bar.
And that's not a bad thing, right? Staff should be a high bar. I mean, I'm definitely not going to disagree with that. So, but it is, I think, definitely a lot to think about as a senior. Just like, That's like a pretty hard bar you set, and now it's like got to think about how best to approach that and get there.
Yeah, but I mean that's one of the great things about GitLab, honestly. Like, is that bar is so achievable. Like, it's not something you probably will have to fight for in GitLab. Like, our engineering department and GitLab as a whole, like, is collaborative and kind. And if you want to know, somebody out there wants to teach you. And it doesn't have to happen overnight. Like, influence is never built overnight. Nobody just like pops into a Slack room and suddenly like, I'm here.
Yeah.
Like, it takes consistent action over time. It's the same as building trust. And if you are consistently hanging out in the GitLab or in like the CI chat room, and when TAMs and salespeople are coming in and you're answering those questions, and you're like, when there's a thread about something and you're in it, like pointing to the code, like, and learning or pairing, it's the same behaviors that you exhibited as an intermediate to get promoted to a senior in a different sphere.
Yeah.
Like, if you're a senior, you already have all of the behaviors that you need. You just need the opportunity to build your influence.
I think I'm going to add something then, like, I think for anyone who isn't already one, I think the support counterpart role then would be kind of a really good opportunity to do that, like to start, if they haven't already, to start building that kind of influence and to make those connections and really dive deep into an area. Because it's funny because I'm not officially the counterpart for a dev group, but I've been doing some of that work that a counterpart would with some of the dev teams. And I think that that's probably where, I definitely see, building that influence and learning, really diving deep into an area. And it just comes more naturally when you're the counterpart for a specific group.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great piece of advice. Like, and we have open ones.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I know we do. All right, I think we'll end the recording there then. Thank you very much for your time and your consideration, your thoughts. I think this will be really helpful. If nothing else, at least to get us all thinking about it.
Yeah, and definitely, like, if you have any questions or clarifications, like, this was a conversation designed to get everyone thinking about this, and the details of it, as you put together your doc, are much more personal and involved and best worked through with your manager. But definitely feel free. Like, I'm more than happy to talk about this stuff, as your manager also should be. So the invitation is there. Doors are open.
Thank you. I'm sure that everyone appreciates how open you always are with your calendar. So, all right.